Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another episode of our podcast, A While Back. Today's title is going to be The Aftermath of the Texas Blizzard. So, as everyone is well aware, it was an incredible transformation of temperatures that came through Texas, essentially devastated produce, devastated electrical grid throughout almost the entire state. Water supplies were also damaged in most major cities. Texas is, as always, resilient and coming back quickly. So what we're going to talk about today, though, is we're going to talk about what happened out here at Dad and Mom's place. And we're going to talk about animals. We're going to talk about the environmental conditions. And first and foremost, we're going to talk about the Goliath, Grandpa's miniature Hereford bull. I was really worried about Goliath because I did not know how he would do in such extreme temperatures. Turns out, Goliath did very well. He did as well as all the other cattle, so we were very pleased with that. But Dad, did you want to go on and speak to the cattle and how they did?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of Goliath, man, Goliath's tough as nails. That bull could probably go through 0 degree weather. But anyway, it was probably around, I think it was 13 degrees out here. And what I noticed about cattle, they all survived. Everything was good because I had fed them real good the day before and also the day of the freeze I came out here. But amazing thing was the day of the freeze, I had a cow that I've been watching for her to calve for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And to my...
It was amazing.
It was
truly amazing.
Yes.
Right.
What happened, the cow calved on the day of the 13 degree weather. And so when I was feeding those cows that morning, I kept looking for that big cow to come, and I didn't see her. And finally she started come walking up to eat, and I noticed that her belly was gone. So I said, uh-oh, she had that calf, but I wonder where.
Yeah.
And I was sure that the calf probably would be dead with them temperatures the way they were. But anyway, I walked into the barn there, and to my surprise, there was that calf just laying there as healthy as could be. And so that calf survived through that coldest day, and that cow had to have that calf on the coldest day of the year.
Exactly.
And talking about cold, I think they were saying that since 1909 was the last time it was this cold. But also another thing on the garden side, I had broccoli, and it was about 3 to 4 feet high, and it takes a lot for broccoli or cabbage to freeze, and I noticed that it just burned that broccoli completely up, and it burned the cabbage too. A few of the cabbage survived, but very little. But the thing that amazed me was that the lettuce, that romaine lettuce, it was still green. It's still green today, sort of. It burned it real bad, but it didn't kill it like it did the broccoli or the cabbage. Of course, I had some red beets, and I mean, those were just sheared to the ground, it seemed like. And of course, it affected all the trees, fruit trees, citrus trees, and seems like it just burned them all up. But hopefully all that stuff will come back. So yeah, it was a hard freeze for us down here. We're really not used to it.
No.
Well, I was lucky as far as the plumbing's concerned, the piping, that it was all wrapped up. Grandsons helped me wrap it up real good. So it all survived. But other than that, I mean, we got through it.
Well, and it was a couple of episodes back we had talked about the peach trees and your other trees.
Oh, yeah.
And how they can get fooled into believing that winter's already over. And unfortunately, you want to talk about your orange tree and your tangerines?
Oh yeah, they got all burned up. They're all, at first it looked like they just had a slight burn, but as the days went by, you can see them turning browner and browner, and now the whole trees are brown. But those peach trees, they had all those beautiful pink buds on them. I mean, pink flowers, buds ready. They were ready to start putting on small peaches. Now all those are gone. I mean, it just burned them all back.
Exactly.
So it's going to be a while for all that stuff to come back. And I know this year the peaches probably won't make anymore because those are the earlier peaches, and they're usually ready in about the end of April or stuff. So it's the early peaches. Now the later peaches, I've noticed they're not even budding
Oh, they're not
out
even
yet.
doing anything, right?
So those going to be later, and I think they're like in late June or something. So those got a chance of still making, but the early peaches they just got burned up.
Yeah. Well, and it was really tough, like you had said, on the trees and your vegetables. But back to the little calf that was born, because that calf was born in the barn. And the barn is, of course, it had rained. There was ice that was already starting to form and water that was still there. And it was installed.
In a dry spot.
Yeah, it was in a dry spot.
It was in a real good
It
dry
just
spot
happened that the mother cow was smart enough to have dropped that calf in that one dry spot.
In that good dry spot.
So that was why it was such a little miracle that little bull came out of there alive, because she found the one dry spot in the barn, and that's where she dropped that calf. And that was incredible.
I think Goliath might have led her to that dry spot. I got Goliath to take care of that.
You're giving Goliath way too much credit than he deserves. So the other thing I was going to ask you about, so the pond.
Oh, yes.
How did the pond freeze? What did that look like?
Oh, man. Now, the grandson and I went over there that morning of the freeze, the 13th. And I told him, I said, you know what? I think that pond's just completely froze. And he said, oh, no. So I said, well, we had a pitchfork with us. And so we got there and he stabbed it. And you could see that ice was pretty thick. It was at least a good half-inch thick.
Yeah.
And so he said, oh, man, this thing is frozen. So we had to punch a few holes from the shallow part of the pond to get the cows water and stuff. But in the middle, it was still frozen. So that goes to show you how big of a freeze that actually was. For it to freeze a body of water like that size, you usually don't see it freeze in the middle.
No, not in the middle.
Yeah, you'll see it freeze on the outside, but the middle, where it's pretty deep, you just don't see that.
Exactly. That's the point I was going to bring up, is that in the middle, it's about 8 to 10 feet deep. And for it to freeze,
12 feet deep.
or even it's 12, okay, so to freeze across the entire length of it, that is something. That tells you just how powerful the storm was.
Yeah, so it was. It was really powerful. It was a hard freeze.
Yeah. So even though, unfortunately, Grandpa lost a bunch of vegetation and some future trees, some future fruit that was coming down the pipeline, the good news was that all the cattle survived. More importantly, there was even a miracle birth that had happened on the day of the hardest freeze. And out of everything, I can attest to the fact that even though the pond did freeze, this afternoon I was over there, and there's still 3 big bullfrogs that are alive and kicking.
Oh, are there?
Yeah, unfortunately, I did not see any little turtles, so we may have lost turtles. But did y'all see any kind of fish on the side? Anything else that came up?
I drove around the tank a couple of days in a row, and I was looking if I could see any fish dead or anything, but I didn't see anything dead on the bank or anywhere.
I thought for sure the frogs were going to be gone, but there was 3 of them that jumped out when I was walking around there.
Yeah. And another thing, you know what it affected? I mean, I had already quite a bit of winter grass that was coming up in the pasture real good, but man, it froze all that winter grass.
Right.
I mean, it just looks like, it just brown. It froze it big time.
Wow.
So it affected not only the fruit trees and the gardens, but it also affected the pastures. I think.
Right, exactly.
Because the clover, I mean, that wild clover, it takes a lot for that to freeze. And when you get that thing to freeze, I mean, I don't think it actually froze because it's coming back. It's turning green again.
Yeah.
But it did burn it down to the ground pretty much, that clover. And when you burn clover down to the ground, that is a hard freeze.
That is, absolutely.
So, yeah, but all the animals survived, dog and everything else.
Yeah. That was by far the most important thing, was that all the animals did survive.
Yeah.
The second most important thing was, of course, that I'm not sure, but I know that in town here, they had lost electricity for a few hours throughout the entire storm. I don't believe it amounted to a day or two, but they did lose electricity for a few hours throughout the storm. I know that in Corpus, Marty and I, we were without power for, I believe it was almost 36, right around 40 hours. And it finally came up. It was on for a couple of hours, then it would go down again. So it affected everybody. Dad just detailed how it affected them out here at the place.
Yes.
But as always is the case, when it comes to the great state of Texas, everybody's resilient. Everybody was able to go through it. There were, unfortunately, some terrible tragedies that did happen. But across the entire state, everybody buckled down, hunkered down, and everybody's going to respond to it the same way we always do, with great resilience, and we're going to come through it with minimal effect.
Well, I think what they had, they had those rolling blackouts.
Yes.
And I think the longest probably we were out here without power could have been about 10, 11 hours maybe. That would have been the longest. But
right.
I know in town and everywhere else, I know they had those blackouts that they were trying to, cut the electric off
Absolutely.
for like 4
right,
hours
right.
and then kick it back on and keep everything going. Of course, the biggest problem in town I've noticed was the water. Man, that was the water. In fact, I went around a motel over there, and I noticed. I guess they didn't cover.
The piping.
Cover the pumps or whatever they had, and this water was just shooting all over the place.
Wow.
And so I guess they had to get that all fixed up. But
Right.
yes, some of that pipes that weren't covered like they should have been. It really got them hard.
Absolutely.
But like at daughter's house, I know we left covered all the faucets and everything, and let use the pipe insulation and let the water run
Right.
all day and night. That way, it keeps your pipes from freezing. So.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things that when the weathermen tell you that there's a hard freeze coming, protect people, pets, and plants. We found out that that's exactly what you have to do. And, for almost the entire state, everybody was buttoned up. Everybody had pipes insulated, covered up. Pets, I'm sure everybody had them inside. I know ours were inside for 3 days. So that's one of the important things is follow it. When they say people, pets, and plants, definitely watch out for them because you're going to have to.
And if you think about it, if you take people my age or some even older than me, they never even experienced anything like this.
Right,
and
right.
I know all the younger ones, they definitely didn't
No.
experience anything like
No.
this. So it was experienced and a lesson in life, I guess, for us to take heed to those warnings sometimes. And it was to our benefit to protect our plants and pipes.
Right.
And stuff.
The only bad thing that had happened around Corpus and myself and Brian, we do a lot of fishing around Baffin, is because the worst thing that could happen was there was a big fish freeze. There was a big fish kill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Along the bay?
It was along the bay. I think Baffin was not nearly as bad as all the other bays were. But from Galveston all the way down to Port Mansfield, there was a huge fish kill. We've been watching videos of it for the past week. Yeah, it was really bad.
So you mean that bay will freeze? I mean, they'll freeze in the
If they can't
bay
get
like
to
that?
deep enough water, the fish just can't tolerate that kind of climate change.
Oh,
They become
is that
stunned,
what
they
it
become
is?
disoriented, and they eventually wash up on shore.
Oh,
And then I'm sure that a lot of you know this, but it's not just the fish that you see on shore. There's also a bunch of fish that are still hunkered down on the bottom that are already dead. That's just bodies on the bottom.
Oh,
Eventually they'll come to the side, they'll float up, and they'll be on the shoreline. So there is going to be quite a bit of a devastation to the fish population. But like I was joking around with Brian the other day, everybody in the state of Texas, and it was no longer a joke when this came to fruition, when we found out about the fish kill. Everybody literally should be practicing conservation, catch and release going forward with whatever you're doing in Texas bays. Keep whatever you're going to eat, a couple of them, but first and foremost, please practice, catch, and release. It's going to be important for our bays.
So let me ask you, what kind of fish were they mostly finding? Was it trout?
There was
redfish, or
plenty of trout. There was a ton of
skipjack or whatever?
yes.
a lot
There was a ton of bait fish, a ton of croaker, a ton of mullet, skipjack, pinfish.
Oh, really?
There was a lot of trout. Not as many trout from what I understand as the bait fish, a ton of hardhead. But what we were watching, and I watched a bunch of videos from it, there was not quite as many reds and drum that had perished.
That was good. Yeah.
And you can see in some of the videos where the redfish were actually congregating in the shallow, and there was hundreds of them that were just trying to stay warm in the shallow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it looks like redfish, and I hope I'm saying this correctly based on what Texas Parks is going to find out later on, but it looks like redfish and drum did a much better job of surviving the freeze than unfortunately trout did. Because it looks like there were quite a bit of the trout population that took a pretty big hit on it. But once the bait fish took the hit, you know, that's going to devastate a lot more.
Well, that's true too, because that's what they feed off.
Exactly.
And I wonder, wasn't any of those dolphin?
You know, now that you mention it, I don't know if any dolphin or porpoise. I didn't see anything on that whatsoever. So, being warm-blooded mammals, I'm sure they went down.
Oh yeah, that's true. They went into the deep. They don't stay in the shallow.
No. And primarily the ones that washed up on shore was, like I said, a ton of bait fish. They didn't have a chance to get to the deep, and if they did, they were going to be eaten either way. So I'm pretty confident that's exactly what happened, is that any of the fish that were unfortunately caught in the shallower water perished right away after it blew. So.
And how about the shrimp? Did they say anything about?
You know, that's one thing I haven't
seen.
I have not seen or heard anything about the shrimp.
Okay, well, I think the shrimp, they stay in deeper water.
They do, but we're waiting to see.
But how about flounder?
Flounder, I didn't see anything on either.
You haven't seen on those?
No,
they
unfortunately.
Like sort of shallow water.
They love shallow water, right? So we'll find out, because Texas Park is supposed to be releasing a report, and by the time you all see this, hopefully the report will come out. But they're going to release a report on the mortality rate from this freeze, and they'll have a better idea of what did perish, the numbers, the percentages that are perished. So unfortunately, I'm sure there's going to be regulations that are going to be coming forth from this. But like I had said earlier, you know, when we had joked about it years ago about what's catch and release, now after this freeze, everybody should literally be practicing catch and release. It's going to be important across the board for everyone. But that's my 2 cents on the Texas coastline.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking too, they might drop the limits on that.
And it's possible that's the first thing they're thinking.
Fish and all of that.
Exactly, that could be the very first thing that happens. You're right. Yeah. So, well, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
That's it.
All right. What else would you like to say?
Let me tell you something else.